We have a guest speaker, like I told you last week, and it is one of your classmates who is also one of the instructors here on campus. And Lee Sled, who has, as most of us, run across several communication, cultural differences between what we would consider in a Western civilization to be business communication and what somebody in another culture might consider to be acceptable communication and what is not acceptable. So we're going to have that instead. So what I want you to do is to read through the PowerPoint presentations for this week on basic messaging. You all know how to do messages, so I don't need to teach you how to do that. But because this is Outlook for professionals, and in a business setting, you want to remember that the messages that you do send out have, full sentences. They have good punctuation, good grammar. You are careful of what you write, that you're not, OMG, my BFF. And then how to create a good signature block. One of the things that you will be doing is in today's lesson, or this week's lesson, is that you are going to create an invitation to me based on your role in the team to something called T-Zone. For those of you who are not in the network and cybersecurity program, T-Zone is the once a quarter PC Fix-It clinic. And that means that you can bring your computer, whether it's a desktop or a laptop, here to campus, here on this floor and down at that end. And our first and second year network and cybersecurity students will check it out, diagnose it. If they can, fix it. If they can't, write down a fix-it plan. Or if you need special equipment purchased and put in, then they will look up stuff for you and tell you where you can get the best buy. And so what you're going to be doing in your role as either a member of the dog grooming company, the vendor, or the customer is sending an invitation. If you were the dog grooming company, you are going to send that invitation as, I want you to be creative. And I've had some wonderfully creative responses in the past, where you're going to offer something like, if you bring your dog in to be groomed today and pay for this, we have some interns from the local community college who will check out your computer and make sure that your dog is clean and your computer is clean. Something along those lines. If you're the vendor, for example, if you were the banker, the bank might be offering, for everybody who comes in on Saturday to open up a new account, we also have, members from the local community college to clean up your computer. If you're the customer, what I want you to do is to invite a friend, I will be your friend, to come to the dog grooming T-Zone thing with you. Let's both bring our dogs and we'll bring our computers. So I want you to be creative. And T-Zone, the time here on campus is usually 9 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. It's a Saturday, always a Saturday. And you can bring any computer in. So you can have them come to the campus, or maybe, we'll be setting up the dog grooming in the parking lot, or that we have campus people that are here at our dog grooming place doing the computer fix-it. Like I said, be creative. You don't have to have the same thing. Everybody in your team doesn't have to have the same exact thing. You can make up your own. Any questions? Let's see, what else? So that's your message. There's some more information in here. The lab instructions will give you more information on what T-Zone is. And so your signature block is going to be based on your role in this team. This is where, when I asked you to create a team name for the dog grooming business, or if you're the banker or the supplier or whatever, you're gonna have a name. So the business is going to have, you know, thank you, or very sincerely yours, and a name, and maybe some basic contact information. Dog groomer, 1-800-555-1212, something like that. The customer is going to be a little bit different because it's not going to be like the dog grooming company or the vendor, because they're not a business. So it would be something like, you know, love Deb, you know, but it needs to be a full signature block. Thanks, it was good to talk to you, DebraPadden, you know, here's my cell number. Okay, simple. And the dog grooming companies or the business can use logos. So you want to put a logo in there. The customer, please do not put pictures in there that are of children. I have problems with people putting pictures of children in signature blocks that go out over the internet. Okay? So that's what you will be doing this week. So, if you haven't met him yet, I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. Lee Sled, who is an instructor in the
English second language.
Right. So Lee, I'm going to have you come up and get started.
Right. Well, thanks to Deb for inviting me. I'm in this class because I need to use email as a professional. I don't consider myself unprofessional, but I've still got a lot to learn, and I just want to master this tool. So I really appreciate Deb letting me join the class with you guys. What I have for you is pretty short and simple, but it deals with what I do in my day-to-day work a lot, which is try and teach people how to be better writers. And also, all the students that I work with come from other countries, come from other backgrounds. So I put a lot of thought into that topic of what does it mean to be a good writer? What do I need to teach my students so that they can be professional when they get to college? And if they, I teach both immigrants and international students, so some of them are going to live here and enter the workplace here. Others may go back to their countries. But I'm going to start with something that, you know, there's a lot of stuff kicking around the internet, so give me 1 second here. Okay, we already got internet. Here, I'm going to keep the title top secret for just a second. So I can spring this on you as a proper surprise. There's a lot of memes kicking around Facebook and the internet, and I'll start you with one of them I saw not too long ago. You guys can read for yourselves. You know, a couple of years ago, I probably would have seen this, yuck, yuck, yuck. I don't find this funny anymore. I really don't, you know. I get it, and I get kind of where it's coming from, and the people who, you know, do find it funny, and as English teachers, we see a lot of different stuff coming across the desk, and some of it is accidentally funny, and some of it is just not standard English. Sorry. You know, this actually disturbs me now because it brings to mind the privilege that I had growing up as a native speaker of a certain variety of English, which is in no small part why I have the job I do. And in what I'm teaching day to day, you know, we all want to be good communicators and we all want to be professional. But when we say professional, what do we mean, right? And what do I have to teach my students to fit into, in this case, an American definition of professional English? So one of the places that I started looking at this question, you know, being that my students come from other countries, it made sense for me to ask them, well, okay, how do you guys write in your culture? And last year I started thinking a lot about email, and that's why Deb's invited me to this class. I'm happy if people can write a 5-paragraph essay. They need that for English 101. But the fact is, when they go on to business and IT and engineering and nursing and these other realities, they may or may not ever write another 5-paragraph essay in their life. Whereas email, we know that this is workplace communication. So I decided to focus on that with my students. Also, the emails that I'm getting from my students are all over the place as far as formality, grammar, subject matter, and so a combination of, well, I'm going to pass these guys on to college and their email looks like this, and the reality of in the workplace email really matters. I decided last year that I was going to kind of zoom in on this and teach it. So one of the things I did to check myself was I got together with some adults from these other countries and asked them, well, what does email look like where you're from? Many of the students I work with now are from China, so I've given you 2 examples, one on the front, one on the back. And I had one informant from mainland China and another one from Taiwan. And it'll just give you a glimpse. So I'll give you guys a minute to just look it over. Put one on the dot cam for the benefit of the video here. Whoa. All right. Okay, I guess I'll start with the mainland. Some of the things that I see are format related. So I see a lot of dates coming after signatures. Format's no big deal. Different conventions in informality, especially with openings and closings. And because of cultural differences in colonial history and British influence and other things, some of those openings and closings come off as just way too formal, way too elaborate. From our perspective as native speakers, a lot of time, when I'm assuming native speakers, excuse me for that assumption, but you get an email like that and you think, okay, is this a scam? Like, some red flags may go up subconsciously or otherwise that this is off somehow. And sometimes it's just the formality is too formal. At the bottom are some cultural notes. And I'll point to the part about requests that sound like begging or apologies that just sound like really pathetic. Again, that's from my cultural perspective. Apparently, and what I've been told by this informant is when you're making an excuse over there, you'd better make it convincing. You know, it just better be a dire situation. And so they give you a lot of detail. And also differences in formality. They have specific terms, honorifics, that they use to address their professors and teachers. And we have a lot less power distance in American culture. We like to aspire to or pretend, depending how cynical you like to be, that we're all equals and we don't have a power distance. In their culture, they're very upfront about, no, I'm the boss and you're not. And that comes out in the language. In the Taiwanese, it was kind of the same, but this informant was a little bit younger and had some other notes for me. Just right off the bat, though, look at the openings. So I got Miss Lou with a colon. I've got first name, last name, comma, hello. Completely different word order. Here's a formula that's been translated right out of the first language, Wang teacher. So this is a last name with teacher being an honorific title in Chinese. And then I have to tell my students that here, if you say teacher, you're probably in elementary school. Little stuff, little linguistic stuff, but also cultural stuff. Yeah, so again, elaborate details from our perspective. We say emails should be short and sweet. We say keep it to the point and directly say what you want. And that is just, that's not the same in every culture. I was, here at the college working with somebody at one of our front desks, and I noticed the gentleman was not giving me a lot of eye contact. No big deal, different cultures. But, am I aware of that? Am I aware that, because the way I grew up, no eye contact meant, what? I'm not interested in you. You're not a person I want to be friends with. I have a lack of social skills. No eye contact had a very negative connotation in my culture. But, you know, same thing when you get an email and you're working in a global world and in a diverse country, are you able as a reader to take a step back and say, well, I don't know this person's story, I don't know their background. Maybe my interpretation of this is not the way it is. Have you guys been into this with Facebook and email and chat in your life maybe? No, never. Me and my brother went about it a couple of years ago. Text is sometimes ambiguous. Text is sometimes cold. So I see now in my workplace, I used to teach for years, no emojis, no smileys. Guess what? In my workplace now, people are using smileys, and the reason for that is they don't want to come across as cold and unfeeling. And so if they know me, it is professional, but they know me by my first name, yeah, they'll throw an emoji in there to let me know, you know, I'm just kidding around or I'm not pissed off at you. So again, what is professional? I decided that it would help my students if I tried to define for them what I meant by professional. And this is what I came up with. Clear, short subject line. We don't need full sentences. You could, but I was getting subjects that were way too long. Salutation, I taught them some formulas, and the one thing I emphasized was figure out how the person wants to be addressed. Do your best to figure out what is their first name, their last name, do they use a title or not. You know, when I get Mr. Lee, that's a great song from, I think, the 60s, but that's not how we address people professionally. We use the last name. Clear message. The United States tends to be, especially the Anglo-Germanic side of it, very direct about, say what you want, mean what you say what you mean is the expression, right? Not every culture is like that. I lived 3 years in Thailand, and in Thailand, silence has a lot of meaning. Somebody slams the door, you better figure out why they slammed that door, because they will not tell you. That's less the case in email, but yeah, direct and indirect communication can be an issue. What's an appropriate closing? And then this is the part that gets sort of interesting, culturally inappropriate information. I'm going to be giving you some examples of actual emails that I've gotten here at TCC to illustrate some of these things. Signature, Dave has mentioned the closing block. And, with the world of text, it's really easy to click send. And it just doesn't look professional, as you guys know, if somebody didn't bother to look it over and they've got really obvious spelling and no capitals and stuff like that. It just has this feeling of they didn't care about it. So this was the point system that I put together for folks. And it's 4 points here, 3 points here, but a wide range of potential negatives on the cultural stuff. And that might seem kind of mean until I give you my examples. So here's how this will work. I've got 4 sets of examples. I'd like you to share with somebody because we got kind of a small group, so you want to pair up with someone. And this is a little bit like a, birthday surprise or whatever. They're folded. Please do not open them until I have announced the number. And of course, we'll start with number 1. So if we could get 2 students together with 1 envelope. And I don't know if you guys are able to share. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It'll work. You can go solo. We've got enough. We've got enough. You guys, 1 envelope here? Go up over there with her? Either way, any 2, 3 people can share as long as everybody can see the card. The print is a little bit small. Okay, Emma's got 1. So yeah, go ahead and open up number 1 only, please. And if you could, thinking about the rubric or just your own impressions, what's the issue with the number 1 email? Or are there any issues? Looks pretty good? Functional? And that is my question. I do not discriminate and judge on grammar. I want to know, does it function? And to me, it's functioning. But again, put on... Yeah, well, and put on that other hat. Put on the hat of the character I call Professor Hardass, but I mean there are people in the world that do judge on a lot of criteria. They say, oh, well, this person doesn't spell right, therefore they're not intelligent. Is there stuff like that that might jump out at a more critical reader? Oh, you opened them all up. Oh, sorry. That's okay. That's okay. Didn't read them though, right?
No.
Okay, I gotta close them up. All right, I close them up. I want to surprise you guys a little bit. Number 1. You know, number 1 looks pretty good. The only thing I'm going to see is the opening. There's some capitalization in the opening.
There's a lot of stuff.
Little grammar here and there, but I am not Mr. Lee. I'm just letting you know I'm Mr. Sled. That's the last name. Mr. Lee is fine, but this person is not clear on the forms of address. They could probably use Word or one of these online grammar checkers to clean up some of the periods and commas. And again, the email functions. I got the message. I would say if I use these points, that would be an A email. I would just say, hey, clean up the opening a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe a little ending punctuation on the closing. So editing, right? The only thing this person could do is pay attention to the form of address, who's the name of the person you're addressing, clean up the punctuation a bit. How about number 2? No, you don't have to fix it. We're just saying, is it professional or not, and what are the issues? Take a look, please, at number 2. Oh, and spacing and format is all over the place because of the cut and paste.
So they're basically from different countries.
Yes, mostly from Asia in my class this time around. So Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, Vietnam.
Wait, was the first one supposed to be a professional email?
Well, these are coming from student to teacher, so it's kind of in between. They do know me,
Yeah, they should have been
right?
professional.
But I'm teaching professional email with this rubric. And so, are there any issues with it? And if this was an email, I want to prepare them for the real world of business and all that. If they're sending this,
Teacher?
is it professional?
I can speak in the Chinese.
Well, maybe he wanted to get to the point.
Okay, maybe get to the point. Do they say what they want in the beginning, the end? We're on.
I don't get this one. This one kind of feel like he or she is asking for is sending out how do I want to say, like permission,
Yeah.
reason to not be able
thanks,
to
yeah.
do the homework assignment.
Mhm.
But it feels like this interpretation is coming from a native speaker of a certain language that
Uh-huh.
is trying to translate
Exactly.
the way you speak,
Yeah.
but into English. So there's
Yes.
no formality to it. It's just
Yes.
like jop, 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 jop.
A lot of
But
people
it makes
do,
sense
yeah.
in a way.
Yep.
But this is the only part I didn't understand. This
That last part.
That last
Okay.
part.
I'm with you. I was like, okay. I give you copy. I think he sent an attachment with this.
maybe.
But
That's
yeah, not
what-
totally clear.
Yeah.
That's good.
And the assignment and homework, I can relate to this because while I was away out of the country for about maybe 6 years, I went to a boarding school in a British colony in West
Okay.
Africa, and I noticed that a lot of times there's 2 versions of homework assignment. There's in-class assignment,
Yeah.
and then there's an assignment that you take home to do.
Okay.
Now, if you, for some reason, if you cannot complete any of the one assignment and you send in an excuse note, you have to specify which assignment.
Okay.
So I'm assuming this person is trying to say, I can do the assignment
Ah.
homework. So instead of saying the homework, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, like which one is it?
So
Yeah.
which one is it? So
Thank you.
it presents
Okay.
as like if there's a multiple, this
Okay.
is a specific one I can do. And in reference to that, remember that the whatever attachment I gave it to you sometime. So basically, this person might have seemed to have notified the professor way in advance that
Okay.
he or she might have something
Like asking for an extension.
extension.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I'm curious which place in West Africa you were. I hope you could tell me. Ghana. I wanted to go there. I was going to learn drumming. I ended up going to Thailand.
I learned while I was there.
We got to talk. We gotta talk. I moved you on to number 2, and I got caught up in a conversation back on number 1 here. Can I ask your name? Rashid. Rashid pointed out on number 1 that actually there might be some confusion as to what this person wants. The very last line, either they're using a translator or they're just having some issues, but I give you a copy of my book of the test. I believe that they attached a file. Like, basically they're saying, I couldn't do the homework on time, here it is. It is what it, but I had to read it a couple times. I had to read it a couple times.
I ended up having to take a test in Brooklyn, so I'm giving you information about having to book that test.
Oh, you're right. That is right. Yeah. I booked the test, so here's the evidence of me.
Yeah.
Again, this cultural thing of I'm going to provide a doctor's note. I'm going to provide concrete evidence, which actually in my college class, I don't ask for that. There is no excused absence. You're absent, you're absent. Do tell me so that I know that you're okay. But again, don't tell me all your personal information. And no, you don't have to provide proof. So there's different things going on here. What about number 2? What do you guys see in there? A little confusing, but why? No, it's just
Grammar issues.
okay.
Is it a statement or a question? 'Cause I don't know what you're trying to get across.
This person is telling you that they don't have the computer access.
Yeah.
And that should have been a period. And it says, and then because should have been taken out, and it says I don't have a lot of homework submitted, and that should have been a period too. And then this should have said that is there a solution? And
Okay.
That should have been the question.
So did we get the message in number 2? They're having some computer problems? Is there a solution? I mean, as far as communication, again, first question is, does it function?
Yeah.
I think I got it. How is it in terms of formality and presentation? We got grammar issues that could be edited, and that would help to clean it up. What about the opening? First one called me Mr. Lee. What's the second one called me? Teacher, which is very honorific in other cultures. But again, I feel a little bit like kindergarten when I hear that. And it's cute and it's fine and it's fun, but I really want them to get that before they move on to college. It's like I have students that ask if they can go to the restroom. I don't want them to enter the college class in TCC and do that. You know, accidentally, I did lots of accidentally funny things when I was in Thailand, believe me. Stories, but I don't have time for them. The one I will tell you about is it relates to the nose. All right, and it's not too nasty, don't worry. But you know, different cultures, different ways of doing things. If you're in Thailand and you're on the bus and you have a little allergies, what are you supposed to do about it? Well, my culture, you know, no problem. Okay, yeah, I got it covered. Take care of that. Thank you very much. Put that right back in my pocket. And then I'm going to shake your hand. And the Thai people are like, whoa, you know, number one, why did you put that back in your pocket? You know, and you want me to shake your hand? So the correct action in the Thai culture is this. All day. And if I do that, my stepfather, who's from England, he will blow a fuse because that is exactly wrong in his culture. It'll take about 2 sniffs before he says, get a tissue. All right, total opposite behaviors, and one is okay here and one is okay there. Same stuff can crop up in your emails. How about number 3? Again, these are subconscious things people take for granted and assume. And what about, isn't number 3 beautiful? There's a little backstory to number 3. A little too short. It was to the point. Straight to the point, and I like that. I like the directness. But is it a little too short, maybe? Just maybe? Does it seem like, I mean, there's not even a capital or a period or an opening or a closing. Does it seem like they just tossed it off or like because that's how I felt. As it happens, this particular student, the homework they attached was 100% plagiarized, which indicated that, yeah, they were kind of in a hurry and not putting a lot of time into it.
So they were trying to convince you that it was their homework.
Yeah, my homework. The my is the key word, right? Now, I can say that I responded with the same brevity. I gave a 2-word response, having identified it as plagiarism, and I said, you're 0. Ta-da! You know. I do wish that student the best, but it probably didn't work out very well. Number 4. Number 3 was easy.
Wow.
So there was an ad campaign in Korea which identified this special day as Magic Day, and we did have an instructor that received an email about Magic Day and had to go figure that out. All right. I told you we would get there. These are real emails, and it is a, you know, the professors get around the water cooler, have a chuckle, but I mean, we don't want anybody to have this sort of embarrassment in their professional life. So we do need to teach what's acceptable and not acceptable. Now that's my job, and those are my students, and I don't expect anybody in this room having that sort of misunderstanding. But from the reader's side, again, maybe you go into international business, you go overseas, maybe you get some diverse clients and people in right here in the United States, you hire somebody. I would just say take a step back and, I'll laugh at the water cooler, but it's just a misunderstanding. It's just a cultural thing. How do you have the conversation with your coworker or your colleague to sit them down and say, I've had a lot of these conversations for various reasons, and they're delicate conversations, but it's a worthwhile thing to do. But whatever it is, whatever impression you're taking away from the email, whether it's in your face like this one or something where it doesn't quite feel right, do take a step back as a reader and cut somebody a little bit of slack. Don't put it in the round file so quickly would be my request. To me, the ideal world would be where adaptation is a two-way street. That's not how it always functions. When I was in Thailand, and today there is still one dominant group in the country. They live in the central Bangkok area, and they run the show. They determine what's taught in the schools. They've got the money, and everybody else has to kind of adapt to their style of language and everything else. That may be the reality, but hopefully, and especially in a pluralistic country like ours, we're working on where the listener and the reader is also adapting, not just the speaker and the producer of the language. I can't make that happen as one professor at TCC, but I can encourage us to think about it so when we go out in the world that we are not just good communicators in terms of, well, my grammar is perfect, but how do you receive somebody else's grammar when theirs is not quite perfect? Are you going to judge them, or are you going to work with them? That's the question that I'll put out there. And again, an open question for all of us, what is professional? This one falls short, all right? Number 4 falls short because in my culture, if it's below the belt, we don't want details. If it's in the bathroom, we don't need a lot of information. And that's just something that I provide to my students, and that's where that thing on the rubric is of TMI. I teach them what it is and how we define it in my culture. The last one, number 5, is, yeah, please.
So, my question for you is, you have got a lot of these emails here that
Yes.
are unclear or inappropriate or, whatever you may call them.
Right.
Do you inform them in the beginning of, by the way, if you have a female personal issue, you can email me and say, hi, Mr. Lee, I'm having personal issues today where I'm unable to come to class. My apologies.
Absolutely.
Do
Yeah.
you tell them that ahead of time? Or do you make that completely clear? Because I feel like if it's completely clear, I'm not understanding why you get so many emails like this.
Well, I like your idea of actually raising it before it crops up. Now that I teach email, I do teach it using these anonymous examples. And yeah, the language that I provide is I'm having a personal issue, I'm having a health issue. Yeah, because people need to know what to say. What am I going to say? And they also should know that, if you want to come to my office and talk to me about it, I'm here for you, and as a professor, I will support you, and tell me. Go ahead and tell me. I'm not a psychologist. I'll refer you if you need help. But I would advise them also not to put all that in email because it's going to be stored on the state server for 5 years because anybody can forward it to anybody. We have to have that conversation too about security and personal information. But I also, you're right, I give people the accepted formulas that you can use in a phone message or an email for that. And I should do it at the beginning.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, well, I'm
It's
not trying to
also-
spring a trap on anybody.
Yeah, it's also something I've received emails from my international students that Lee and I have discussed, and what I find out is that because they feel comfortable with me, they divulge health issues below the waist that we normally wouldn't be doing, but they feel so comfortable with me that I learn about their bathroom habits. I learn what happened when they had the flu, and it's actually an honor for me to receive that much information. And then I have to explain to them, you know, usually we don't put those things in an email. Thank you. You know, so I try to school them, but a lot of the classes that I am in, professional technical classes, we don't get an opportunity to start out the course with, okay, this is how you're going to address me, this is how you're going to write what's going on. If you are ill, I don't need to know all of the details of your illness. And so you're suddenly hit with these things. And Lee was really helpful. This is how this conversation started, because I'd received a couple of emails from some Vietnamese students, and he said they wouldn't write that to you unless they trusted you implicitly. So it is an honor that they sent that to me. And then I was no longer offended, because then I understood, oops, you know, what I would consider less than appropriate from somebody from the United States, born and raised here, is something that is entirely appropriate for someone from Vietnam.
And number 5, go ahead, please.
I might add that I think some of these issues is it always goes back to the two continental difference of English, native English speakers. British system of English grammar, conjugation, is mostly acceptable in most of the British colonies. So if you have someone from Thailand, Africa, or maybe wherever there's ever been a British colony, you notice that most of the English grammar is mostly formal, but it's so much aligned with cultural cultural way of doing things. As you know, seniority, you all have respect to this person. If you have any issue, you speak to somebody you trust, or be open to seek assistance. Now, when it comes to the American system, it's a little bit different. Although we all speak English, but the way the English is projected is completely different. And so when it's put before an American receiver or audience, it could be a little bit too private or too formal, because, like you said, it's very, loose-like, there's no sort of like, hard strings to anything. But the British system is very straightforward, mostly like the military way of doing things.
Yeah, they have formulas that they
Yes.
like to stick to.
So this is some of the reasons why it will be very difficult if a student send an email like this. They would know that it's not acceptable in the American way of doing things, because it's two different systems, but somewhat cousins in a way, which is the British English and the American English. There's two differences. There's certain ways of grammar is spelled in a different way in the British English to that of the American English. So there's certain words. I had the privilege of attending boarding school in West Africa for about 8 years. And one thing I noticed is that when I came back, most of my English papers, my professors always pull me aside and say, "Hey, you write really good English. Where did you went to school?" And so I went to a boarding school in British colony in West Africa. So I knew it, because there's something about the way you write your words. The words are different. Not to say the American way is wrong, but the spellings of the words are completely different from the American way, And I wouldn't have noticed that hadn't he pointed out to me. So I think this is something that probably, to help solve the issues like this, it will be, maybe there has to be some type of like the way we have the ESL, we'll probably have to start teaching some of the foreign students that the American way of English grammar, conjugation, and conversation might be slightly different from where they're coming from. So if anything, they might have to consider consulting with a English professor, because if not, these type of things will be happening by their own, not by their own fault, but it's just the way they project it, Finally, I would like to say, when someone isn't an English native speaker, when they speak English, they're literally translating their local dialect, the language they speak, they're translating it into English. So that's why sometimes you have the improper grammar and placer of certain conjugation in English. But that doesn't mean they're not smart or they don't know what they're talking about. They just don't know the formality of how to translate it right, So yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, and again, what's professional, your note on British culture, you get a PR email. My stepfather, my mom live over in England, and so yeah, dear sir, that's still the standard, dear sir, madam, standard format. Americans tend towards informality, we like it, and there's also a sense of we make friends faster, we move around a lot, and so a lot of advertising, especially here now, is deliberately informal. You may be getting some political emails, and they kind of trick you into opening them by sounding like one of your buddies, right? Like, hey, Lee. I mean, that's an extreme example, but hi, again, on my email at TCC, I get a lot of emails that open with hi. So what's formal enough is very cultural. And what is normal is something that it's worth pausing and considering as a reader or a sender, because for most of the business world and even the college professor world, these things are simply assumed, and it's assumed that everybody knows. Nobody ever comes out and says what the secret code is. It's assumed that you learned it in some other class before you got to my class, or you learned it before I hired you. And that's where people, I think, get into, not danger, but misunderstandings and then judgments. Number 5, you probably already opened. It just reiterates what Deb honed in on. Yeah, thanks, right? From my American perspective, it's like I didn't need that image with my coffee. But there it is. And it's not the only one, there it is. These are extreme examples. There are subtler ones that, again, they raise a question in your mind or that doubt of like, where's this person coming from? What do they mean? And at some gut level, you may even have an emotional reaction of, do I trust this person? Do I want to work with this person? In business, it's about relationships, isn't it? About trust and especially sales. And so whether it's your coworker or a customer or a client, if we're all sort of mindful and thoughtful about what could be happening, it's okay to just say, I have no idea what's happening, and then just refrain from judgment until you can talk to the person. And that's my last point. Remember your phone. I get into so much trouble with email when I could have just picked up the phone sometimes, instead of even worse on the phone with your thumbs, Sometimes, especially sensitive, emotional, misunderstanding, conflicts, things where I'm stressed out that somebody's evaluating me negatively and it's going to affect my job security or whatever's stressing me out. Best thing I can do is walk down to the office, knock on the door, and sit down and talk to them. And if I can't do that, pick up the phone. Because a lot of the stuff that happens with email may not even be cultural. It may just be like, this is not the best medium for the communication that you need to have. So I do appreciate your time, and I wish you guys the best in your professional futures. And I think we can all be professional without being uptight. Let me put it like that. We can be professional enough and have functional communication if we're thoughtful, as always, about the audience and the purpose. All right. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.